conversation with Greg Lambrecht, the founder and creator of Coravin, which is this wonderful device that we can't live with anymore. This is, by the way, you got that. You got the 6. It looks like this is the.
Yeah.
This is
also the same.
Also the 6. Yeah, I have like they multiply. This is the Vinous edition that we'll talk about in a second. But it's great to have you on the show, Greg. Thanks for your time.
Great to see you, man.
Yeah,
it's great to see you. I got to tell you, I'm a huge fan. I've been watching a bunch of these things. I've learned something about myself. I cannot get enough of watching really great Burgundy producers talk to you. It's totally worth the hours.
It's good that they're on, and I think that we created this series with the whole idea that, well, you have an interesting story to tell us in a few minutes, but I mean, obviously we've all been sort of shut in one place here now for about 10 weeks or so, depending. And these seminars and these talks have become really great moments for people to be able to spend some time together. And if you're a winemaker, you sit in your office in Monforte or Chambon-Musigny, and you can talk to hundreds of people at once. And then these webinars get recorded and they get reviewed over and over. And I think it's that was sort of the goal, to kind of help keep us all a little bit together, even though we can't really be physically together. So
it's working, man.
Yeah. So anyway, thanks for your time. We've got some really cool wines. I thought it would be fun to put Coravin to the test. So I took some wines that we had opened together last time. And but before we get into that, I'm just curious, because you've got such an interesting background. You've created this fabulous device that we all can't live without. But how did this all happen? Because your background is really in medicine.
Yeah. Well, a couple of different careers. We both went to MIT. I went undergrad. You were in business school, as I recall.
They actually let me out.
Yeah, they kicked me out. But so I studied physics, and I was a plasma physicist. I was a sort of green peacenik. I wanted there to be fusion power so that we could supply energy and just burn hydrogen. It took me 4, 5, 6 years to figure out that was never going to happen, and that solar was the way to go. And so I left that field and went into medical device design and engineering and development. And I was lucky to get hired by Johnson & Johnson as a consultant when I was in grad school, and then by Pfizer afterwards, and invented a bunch of medical devices for different areas of the body. Pfizer works everywhere. At the time, they had 7 different medical device companies. And I was in New York and Manhattan at their headquarters, and we were developing brand new products that had never existed before for unmet clinical needs. One of them that I worked on very early was an implantable device for chemotherapy delivery, normally to cancer patients that needed prolonged treatment. And it was this implant under the skin, and you would stick it with a needle over and over again over the course of somebody's therapy. And so I got really good at making needles that didn't do damage to things. That's the foreshadowing. And fell in love with wine when I was way too young, 16, I think. I'm now in LA. I grew up just, 30, 40 miles south of here in Newport Beach. And my friends drove me up to Napa Valley one wonderful weekend, fateful weekend, and walked into my first winery, had my first sip of wine, and I was totally hooked. Loved the stuff, and I always have. And so as my career went on in medicine, I got to this point where I was traveling 60, 70% of the time, and my wife drank different wines than I drank. So we would always argue about what to open, or should we open, and what do we drink, and is that too good for now? And then she got pregnant again and stopped drinking again. And so I was at a loss. I was like, I can't open the good stuff because she'll be pissed at me, and if I open the bad stuff, I'm not going to drink it. So I remember holding a chemotherapy needle and one of these bottles in my hand. It was actually a $10 bottle of Spanish wine, Mas Donas, and going, I got to be able to get a glass out of this thing with this needle. And took me a couple of weeks to make the first prototype, and drank 5 wines, different wines, the first night. Like I had whites and reds, and just like laid out on the table. I was so psyched. And then I'm like, oh, I wonder if this actually works. Are these all going to go bad? So I started an 8-year testing regimen, going out 5 years, seeing if I could tell the difference between a bottle of Vincorn 5 years ago and another bottle from the same case. So it's a labor of love. I love wine, man.
I can tell. That's great. You have such incredible enthusiasm in everything that we've ever talked about, which is obviously great. And then you started to make prototypes when?
So I made my first in 1999. So yeah, I'm getting old. And I had a day job, right? I'd quit Pfizer and I started my first medical device company. And I would do it on nights and weekends. And then my friend, an investor, a guy named Ryan, I should have told him that I was going to mention him. Ryan's a great venture capitalist, a really good friend. He was getting married 2004. So I had something that like you could sort of operate if you had a stand and you were willing to risk your life and you did dials and knobs. I'd actually taken, I was very proud. I took a trumpet valve and turned it into a valve for the flow. But like there were screws and you had to tighten. So I was like, I'm going to make him a wedding gift. And that means somebody else needs to be able to use it. And so I went through 15 iterations in like 6 months and gave Ryan the very first prototype that left my house. And
Wow.
he still has it. He's still got it. And that was a really productive time. I made these 15 prototypes. Then I was testing everything, different gases and needles. From 2003 to 2011, it was adding new wines to the test, seeing if it worked with everything. And then as a tax deduction, my cellar grew. Yeah, it's been a crazy ride. It's been a crazy ride.
And the first models used, the Coravin now uses argon, but the first ones use nitrogen, right?
No, I tested nitrogen. Nitrogen, carbon dioxide, helium, and argon. My kids did like the helium. we breathed it all, but it did not work. Helium and argon are noble gases, just to bore everybody to pieces. There's no smell, no taste, but helium's too light. Argon's the first noble gas heavier than oxygen. Nitrogen and carbon dioxide are both good. Carbon dioxide smells and it carbonates. It's got that acrid smell that you smell when you get your head over a barrel, right? And it's fermenting. Yeah. Then or fermentation tank. So that didn't work. Nitrogen also dissolves in a fluid, turns out. So nitrogen is not as good as argon. Argon does not dissolve in a fluid. It's a noble gas. It doesn't want to be anywhere. But nitrogen nitrogenates the wine and changes the palate a bit, kind of mellows it, like Guinness beer. Guinness is nitrogen. Please don't ask me about needle.
That's getting very close to the top of what I can handle.
I'm so sorry. I just got off an airplane, so I'm.
Yeah. So what's that like?
So surreal. Like you and I both flew most of the time, right? I mean, we were always going places before this happened. This is the first flight I've taken in like 2-3 months, which is crazy. I don't think I've ever said those words. And I had to come out to LA for a family issue, and it's surprisingly crowded. Like the airplanes were packed. I thought it was going to be empty. They're not seating anybody in the middle, so it's window and aisle. But this plane from Boston to LA, JetBlue, was full.
Wow.
Crazy, which makes you're wearing your mask and people there in gloves and face shields and yet, this whole 6 feet apart. I mean, like I'm 2 feet from the guy in front of me and 2 feet from the guy to my left. So I was going to totally had these good plans of taking off all my clothes and like throwing them in a bag somewhere and setting them on fire. This is a shirt I'm willing to burn. That's why I'm wearing it.
Wow. And so you made it to obviously in good shape. How are the airports? Are there a lot of people in airports too, or is it just the planes?
So I had some guys fly for my spine company a couple of weeks ago, and they came to our company, and there was nobody on the plane and nobody in the airport. LAX and Boston were crowded.
That's incredible.
There was a line at security, like snaking back and forth in LA. And as a medical guy, I'm kind of freaking out. This is not good. Yeah, it's going to be so weird when this opens up. It's not the same. I mean, it's just different. I wonder how long it's going to be before we all feel normal getting on a plane, flying around.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a while, personally.
Yeah, we were talking, and I was going to pour my first wine if I can. Right. So this is the wine that we drank together. One of the wines that we drank together.
Yeah.
And this is back April 2nd. Jesus, that seems like
A month and a
last.
half.
Exactly.
I got one of mine from that day too. But yeah.
So yeah, this is Coravin. You just push it on, tip it, and pour. It's not too complicated. We were talking on
San Nicolo, one of our favorite Tuscan wines, mostly Sangiovese with some Malvasia. I love your glassware. That's fantastic.
Welcome to Hilton. Hilton Pasadena.
It's
We've
glass.
all done this.
It's
We've all
Friday,
done this.
right? It's okay.
Exactly.
That looks like
It's
a pretty good pour. You're going to have to teach us how to get the most out of the capsule. You clearly, you clearly have some inside knowledge there.
Yeah, I do.
I've never been able to get a glass like that.
I totally need a drink. Well, the good news is I brought 4 more bottles. So,
okay, well,
and I don't have a dump bucket, so I'm gonna. Yeah, that was kind of a heavy
that's
pour.
interesting.
But
all right.
I do love this wine. What are you pouring?
This is Canalico di Sopra, Rosso di Montalcino 2007. We had this on that same day. So this is obviously 100% Sangiovese from Montalcino. And
this is an 06.
That's an 06. It's a great vintage. It's your brother-in-law's wine, as I recall.
Yeah.
And I'm using this is the special Vinous Coravin that we've got the deal on right now. We'll post that on social media afterwards when we're done, just so people can see. But it's the best deal on a Coravin in the United States, and I just heard we're going to be doing something similar in the UK for people watching from England. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So that actually is one of my favorite colors, and because it was contentious. So the color that you guys have,
I can't tell. You can tell.
Yeah, well, so we originally named that color champagne, and then you get a call from a lawyer about cease and desist. Yeah, so I've always wanted to call it English sparkling, but then
he'll like that. He'll be all bored. Of course, he would sell about 3 of them with that name.
Come on, Night Timber. They might be watching. How's it tasting, then? Is it pretty good?
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's 17, so that's kind of that is not kind of. It is a warmer vintage, so the wines are really fleshy and juicy. I think it's fun to. I mean, you obviously have a lot more experience than I do with this, so I'm sure that there are vintages and styles of wine that deal with 6 months or 6 weeks or 6 months, maybe even 6 years of being open better than others. But for sure, a warmer vintage wine you think would be a little bit more fragile, and this wine is perfect. It's just like it was when we.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear. This is as well. I mean, it's still stunningly beautiful. You are right. There are harder wines than others. I went through. I was drinking a lot of Nebbiolo at the time that I invented it, and a friend came over and saw it and said, "Sure, works with Nebbiolo. Anything would work with Nebbiolo. Yeah, you got to use it with something more delicate, like red Burgundy." I was like, "Okay, well," and I'd buy a half case of red Burgundy and start this 5-year test. And then someone was like, "Well, yeah, sure, to work with red Burgundy. It never worked with white Burgundy." I'd buy a half case of that, and it was the same for. Then someone was like, "Well, Riesling, and then Gruner Veltliner, and then natural wines came up." So I'm a kind of a big fan of Ganavat. I just love his wine. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it. But his reds are just sort of beautiful natural wines. I've got some Grosvenor as well that I'm doing a blind tasting with. Seems to hold up really well under the Coravin.
So I don't know how it gets more. I mean, it'd be interesting. I don't think I've ever used Coravin with Grosvenor, but obviously those wines have 6 or so years in big barrels, so they've already picked up those kinds of flavors. I would imagine that they're pretty sturdy. Also, it's Ribolla. Ribolla is a very tannic white grape, so it's probably perfect.
Oh yeah, it works really, really well. The Ganavat is different. That is a much touchier wine, and you got to use the Coravin right and store the wine on its side and keep cold, or that thing gets funky.
All right, so tell us, how do you use a Coravin properly?
Oh, you gave me an excuse to have another glass of wine. So, we picked we were trying to pick a theme, and we just decided we were going to talk to each other. And so, part of I did pick a California theme, and just because I've got friends there, and I knew I was going to be here, and I grew up here, so I thought I'd come back to my roots. I've got an Eden Rift Chardonnay.
Okay.
So it's Christian Pillsbury, who used to be the general manager of Coravin Asia Pacific.
Okay.
And they're in really small Cienega Valley. He's trying to grow Burgundy in Cienega, and he's actually doing a pretty good job. I'm glad he left. I'm sad he left us. I'm glad that he started a winery. So technique, quick press the trigger just before you go on to the next bottle, because I was just pouring that beautiful Sangiovese. So I don't want to inject that into my next wine. So quick press on the trigger.
Okay.
Needle goes through.
Yeah.
And then tip it sideways, nice and high, and then press and let go. Press and let go. Most people hold the trigger too long. Multiple little presses until you get the flow rate you like is much better than holding the trigger for a long time. It wastes a lot less gas. So you can pour in with short presses, and then anytime it slows down, if you want more, press it again. You can get up to 20, 22 glasses that way per capsule, 5-ounce glasses. So, and then take it out. I'll be doing that at least 4 more times.
Pretty well. This is one of my first lockdown wines that I opened when I did a seminar with Guillaume d'Angeville. It's a Volnay, Clos des Angles. This is a little vineyard in Volnay that's on the border with Pommard. And
he is just one of my favorite people. Oh my God, Guillaume d'Angeville is a dude.
Yeah. So we have some questions I think we'll get to in a second, and I'd encourage everyone watching. First of all, thanks for being with us on Friday afternoon. But yeah, please give us your questions. The more that we get now, the more we can weave them into the discussion. Sometimes we get them all at the end, and it's kind of hard. But we'll start answering some of these questions real soon. One is pertinent to the wine you're drinking, but yeah. So this is, obviously Pinot Noir, and I do think it's fun to check out with wines that are a little bit more delicate, and usually Pinot Noir would be at the top of people's list of wines that are more fragile. And I'm curious, once a wine has been accessed, do you store it? Is it best to store it on its side or to store it sideways?
On its side. And so we always say clean, clear, and cellar. And clearing was that press the trigger just before you go in the bottle. Cleaning means wash it. So wine flows through here. And so if you leave that wine in there for days or overnight, stuff can grow out on the inside, like Brett or Saccharomyces or Acetobacter. So hot water through here at the end of the evening, if you've used it, cleans it out. And then cellar, store it on its side in the cold. I've done tests upright and horizontal, and it's definitely better horizontal. And that's even true with our screw cap. I have my theories as to why, but I think if there's any little, like the cork reseals, it squishes back just the same way it's closing against the glass. But I think that if any oxygen gets through there and you've got it on its side and the cork is wet, that it sort of clots, almost like blood clots. It dries out and seals that hole off. So I've had a wine 14 years out, post Coravin. Blind tasting was great.
Wow. And so to clean it, does running hot water through this flush itself out automatically, or do you have to do anything?
That's it.
Okay.
And then just press the trigger before you go to the next bottle. Push all the water out. You'll be good.
All right. So tell us about the wine you're drinking.
This is really a stunning Chardonnay. So if you've ever seen pictures of Eden Rift, it's the weirdest valley. I mean, I think it was founded in the 1800s, and Christian Pillsbury picked it up, and like everything had gone fallow, and so he I think he did a bunch of replanting, or maybe he was able to rescue some stuff. And he worked his ass off on this vineyard and doing Pinot and Chardonnay because he's a total Burgundy fan. It's really high up. It's cold a lot of the time, and that's exactly what it tastes like. People think of California Chardonnay as oaky, and people that I run into, and overwhelming and high alcohol. And this is the exact opposite. This is a guy who got close to Burgundy, but still, that hint of California. There's some great richness in the fruit. It's got some good acidity because of the altitude. Alcohol doesn't seem to be very high at all. And what's good is I can't check it because I'm freaking blind and have not come to agree with my eyesight. So on a prescription, but it can't be above 13. It's crisp, beautiful, I would, I always try to put it in reference to Burgundy, but it's not. It's almost like an Oregon, much more similar to an Oregon Chardonnay than it is a California Chardonnay. Beautiful smell too, great nose.
Question from John, since we're having a Chardonnay. He says, when I open a white wine such as Chardonnay with Coravin, it does not seem to last in bottle more than a day or two. Am I doing something wrong? Is there a different technique for whites and reds?
No, there's no difference. Clean, clear cellar. And then a day, I mean, that's nothing. I've done 5, 8, 10 years. So one thing that's important, and this is not to belittle what you're tasting. So clean, clear, and cellar, that's really important. Especially if you've never cleaned it and you've been using it for a long time, and now you're using a dirty needle that may be growing out. Like if you've used it on Chateau Mouchard or Chateauneuf, and it's like screaming Brett, and then you never washed it, and then you inject it into a white wine, that's not good. So if you've never washed it, pour cheap vodka down the spout and kill off everything. So it could be that. Alternatively, if you are cleaning, clearing, and selling, it can be in your head, not to freak you out. But the only way in the last 400 years a bottle wound up looking like this is a bad cork. And so you think you can taste the difference. And I know there's at least one sommelier watching now who is convinced she can tell the difference. It's not that it's oxidized. It's not that it's this or it's that. They start to use words like it's lost its zest. It's lost its verve. It's lost its pizzazz. It's energy. It's, and you're like, what the hell do those taste like? So my favorite, just to bore you, story about that, Jennifer Simonetti Bryan, one of my favorite masters of wine, wrote to me 2 weeks after we launched Coravin, 2013, by the way, July. And she goes, Greg, it works with the whites. It doesn't work with, or it works with the reds. It doesn't work with the whites, just like you're saying. And so I was like, do you still have the bottle? Yes, I do. I've got two different ones. Okay, do you have a control bottle of the same wine? Yes, I do. All right, we're going to meet at Chelsea Wine Vault, and they're going to blind taste this on them. And so we do this thing where we pour 5 glasses. I've done this with Guillaume d'Angeville and his wine, not exactly that one, but it was in 2008. And I just drank it with him at La Pollet, 2008 of his, that he had poured 6 years ago that we drank together. I don't think we blinded that one. Anyway, blinded Jennifer. She was totally convinced that there was a difference. And then we poured her 5 glasses. Some were from control, some were from access. And then she spent 30 minutes trying to find these wines that she was convinced to change, and they hadn't. And I encourage you to do it for yourself, because one thing I learned in medicine, placebo effect, the second word is effect. So if you believe it is different, it is different, because it's in your head's powerful. So I encourage you to do a blind tasting. Have somebody, a loved one, spouse, a child. My kids used to do this for me when they were 5, Coravining and blind tasting me. I encourage you to blind taste yourself. Pour at least 4 glasses. Don't know how many or which one. So you could have 1 glass or 2 glasses or 3 glasses from the Coravin bottle, and the rest are from the control. And it's a 1 in 14 random chance of getting that right. And see if you can tell. And if you can't, start believing. It's a belief cell, and we've got to convince. So,
okay, cool. So what's next? What are we tasting next?
I'm going to go on to just something to stay in the Burgundy realm. Raj Par and his wonderful group. I've never been there, and I want to visit them. I'm such a fan of Raj Par. He's one of the best tasters I've ever met, and speaks so eloquently. This is Domaine La Côte, and it's La Côte. La Côte? Domaine La Côte, La Côte. And it's 2016. I've been Coravining this since June of last year.
Great vintage.
And I wrote Stemmy Pinot, wait.
Lots of clusters on that wine.
Yeah, it seems like a whole cluster. And I actually if done right, it's beautiful. What are you drinking?
I'm going to show you. I'm pouring it right now. I'm going to see your Domaine de la Côte, and I'm going to maybe. I happen to have this wine here. It's not like I drink wine like this every day, Greg, but it is Friday.
Oh, yes, you do.
And we are working like insane hours here at Vinous. And
is this what we do for a living?
Part of the time, once a day.
Once a day. We were talking earlier this week, and we were talking about yeah, don't tell me just yet what you've got, but we were talking about how things are going to change. I mean, I just got off that airplane, and I mean, flight must have changed. It's going to change for years. It's interesting to think of the restaurant, hospitality, all of our friends, wine stores, wineries. Everybody's chessboard just got thrown up in the air, and we're all waiting for it to come down in one way or another. And it's going to be interesting to see what's going to change forever. What the end consumer, when are they going to go back to restaurants? How are they going to go back to stores? They've gotten used to cooking at home. They've gotten used to ordering wine online. Coravin sales are through the roof in the U.S. People are clearly drinking at home. We're one of the beneficiaries of, there are few businesses that do better as a result of this. And it makes you feel guilty. We're donating to charity, by the way. So Independent Restaurant Coalition, please donate to those guys. Bobby Stuckey is a dude. Got to figure out what to do to save people. But it's going to be interesting to see how the world is going to land. And I'd love to hear, I mean, you've been talking to everybody, sort of what you're thinking. And
yeah, I saw your interview with Bobby, by the way, who's one of my favorite people in wine. It was really quite, I have to say, it's a really hard situation. I mean, look, I mean, I've been fired from jobs twice, but true.
For what? I just want to know the reason. I don't need to know the job.
You know, but there were always jobs. You know, it was just like, okay, fine. I mean, it's a shock. It's a real shock. That's one of the worst feelings you can have in life. But whatever. The next morning you get up, the sun gets up, and you can go get another job. But this is a situation where the government one day basically told this entire sector, which has then lots of other capillary sectors, that customers and suppliers, that, hey, you know, public safety dictates that we're going to close you down. And at the beginning, people thought it was going to be a month and 2 months and 3 months. And it's, you know, obviously going to be long for a while. And it's very serious because, you know, it's not just the restaurants, it's the people who sell, you know, you mentioned that people who are cooking at homes. It's the people who sell, vegetables and fish and meat, and who put flowers in restaurants, and the people who clean the linens, and, you know, all of these sort of capillary industries that need for that sector to be vital. Even your Uber or Lyft driver who takes you to one of these places if you live in a city. All of these industries are impacted, and all these jobs are impacted, and it's very serious. You know, in New York, they're saying, well, when the restaurants will open, they'll be at 50% capacity, and there's no restaurant in the world that can operate at 50% capacity. I mean, you're hemorrhaging money at 50%. You probably hemorrhaging money at 75, but people have said that that's kind of like the bare minimum where you can maybe, like, if owners don't take salaries and you are very lean, you can maybe make it at 75. But what a lot of restaurateurs fear is there'll be this phenomenon that you're seeing on the airplane. Well, maybe people will go out a lot the first time, and then the question is, will they keep going? I think that's what a lot of people are worried about. They're worried about sort of a second hit. And, you know, here we are in May, middle of May. Well, you're a medical person, but every person that I've talked to in medicine is saying that the normal flu season for this year is forecast to be fairly intense. And so then you have possibly a second round of COVID on top of the seasonal flu in September, October, whenever that starts to happen. And, you know, if you're a restaurateur, you have to have a tremendous amount of strength to open now when you know that you may have this other thing out. And I think it's just really, really, really hard. And for those people who basically woke up one day without jobs, and it's not just, it's all the people who work in those restaurants, but I mean, I think which is, you know, people studying and spending money to travel, to be educated, to live in a cramped city apartment in New York or LA or wherever, San Francisco. And now to get into a really good place, into a really good job, and those jobs don't exist. They may not exist. All of the restaurateurs I know say 30 to 50% of restaurants will not reopen. And open, most of them, a lot of them will be sort of the more corporate kind of chain type places. And it's just, it's really quite sobering. I mean, that's a bad word to use, I guess, but it's really tough. So the question is, yes, the chessboard is up in the air, and the question is, where are these pieces going to land? And, you know, nobody knows, obviously, but I think you do have to find a way talk to the end consumer. For us, that means education. So a lot of our initiatives right now are around education, but we certainly don't have the answers to it. But I know that we're working harder than we ever have since we launched, which is about 7 years ago. So I mean, it's a pretty.
You got two amazing things. I mean, both Delectable and Vinous. I learned we benefit. I mean, we use Vinous or we use a Delectable for Coravin Moments app. That's how we recognize labels. So we've been working together for a while now, and it's magical. It's absolutely magical to be able to upload into your cellar just by taking a photograph of something. I'm so lazy, and it's so fantastic. And then to be able to buy wine online, I see that growing. And anyone who wasn't digital before in a wine store is going to be digital. Any winery that wasn't that didn't have a direct to consumer club, they must have one now. I worry about those guys. Like you were talking to these guys from Burgundy that you taught them how to use Zoom is amazing. Can they use an electric calculator? Those guys, right? They're excellent farmers.
Yeah. So yeah, obviously digital businesses are advantaged. The question is going to be, will people go back to stores when those stores are available for real? Will people go back to restaurants? I think commercial real estate is really dangerous. All of these spaces, are they going to be viable? And that's why I think we're going to be in this situation for a while, the knock on of it. And I think we can just be prepared. And
I'm looking forward to that day when it does come back. And we love restaurants.
Yeah.
Right. I'll go out again. So this Domaine de la Côte is delicious. It is no longer a wine that I would write wait on. It's drinking perfectly. I could wait, but it is so tasty. Not Burgundy again, right? Which is great. Although I think it's been blinded as Burgundy. Maybe even Pascaline de Paltier thought it was the great Pascaline de Paltier thought it was Burgundy. Sorry. Some people
what?
Some people deserve the honorifics.
He deserves it for sure.
Pascaline the Great.
He deserves it for sure. I think it's a great title. Right. Well, so Santa Barbara, obviously cold. That's a very cold area, and Domaine de la Côte is at the very far end, as you know. And for sure, those wines might be mistaken for Burgundy. But I try to avoid those comparisons only because it suggests to me a sort of a diminutive relationship, and
exactly. Yeah.
So I don't know why can't Santa Barbara Pinot Noir in this case be just as great as Burgundy? It could just be appreciated on its own. I think when you say Burgundian, it implies this sort of subservient relationship, and I just try to avoid. I mean, I've made the mistake many times in my writing, and I still do it sometimes because sometimes there's no better way to express something. But in the back of my mind, I know, like, damn it, you shouldn't say that. Because wrong message. It's not really the message, but.
So just two real quick comments. One is I agree. And Raj Parr stood up at Psalm 360, which is an amazing event that was just canceled, and said the worst thing in the world is when somebody tries to make somebody else's wine. He's like, you got to make your own wine, because if you make somebody else's wine, I can't blind taste it. It's going to taste like somebody else's wine. And that's, you need to make your own thing, special to your own region. So shout out to Raj Parr for that insight, because he's right. It should taste like it should. And then on notes, I learned about Italian wine through you.
Oh God.
You should feel AG. Was I used to read through, and one of the things that I loved about it was you were so consistent in the words that you used to describe particular flavors. Like when you picked up a flavor, it was there, and you used it carefully, and it, independent of whatever the rating was. When I saw some of those words, I was like, oh, I know I'm going to love that. Tony likes it. I'm going to love that. So I've got a whole section of, probably the largest section of my cellar is Italian, just because there's so many grapes, so many regions, so many places, and it's your fault.
I'll tell you what, maybe we can do a business together where you can write the code, or find someone to write the code that maps those into some complex algorithm. And then
we've already done it. Don't get me started. We've already done it.
Yeah.
We're working with some artificial intelligence guys at MIT. And,
that's Google or something. Yeah. All right.
Alrighty, dude. So where are you going to go next?
I opened this wine, Bon Mar 2014 from Roumier. not because it's been open for a long time or because I wanted to check on it, but because I had it a few days ago with Christoph, and it's Friday, and I said, "What the hell? I'm going to drink it anyway." I had no doubt that the wine was going to be in good shape, so I cheated.
2014 Roumier is going to be the bomb. I mean, it's I mean, he makes Fourier and Roumier, like, just bury me in that stuff.
I have to tell you, there's sometimes when the Coravin doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like Bobby told you about Danette, his wife. You know, she doesn't like it. They open the damn bottles.
That was so funny because
there are sometimes Coravin doesn't work. I hate to tell you.
No, I use the Coravin to find the bottle that I want to open, right?
Okay.
So you can even use it that way. But I loved Bobby's wife coming on because somebody brought me charcuterie during that whole interview, because I had not eaten that whole day just because we were going through hell at the time. And so somebody went out to the store during my interview with Bobby and brought back prosciutto and beautiful hard Italian cheese and on a plate. And I was like, "You don't have this." And his wife immediately went out and got charcuterie brought back. Do not throw down with Stucky's wife.
Wait, kick your butt. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to be having my favorite Birkenstock wearing wine producers, which is Mathiasen. So I'm still in California. My favorite one of theirs is their white. It's a field blend white, has Ribolla in it, along with a pile of other things. It just says white wine, white table wine, or something like that, and that underestimates how fantastic that wine is. But these guys are great. They were in our Napa Valley blind tasting. We used their wine for the 3-year blind, along with Donna Estates, which is my next wine. But I don't think there could be 2 more different wines. And Donna Estates,
that's very different. I mean, Steve, for folks that don't know who are watching, Steve is also one of the most respected viticulturists in Napa Valley, and he farms of very high-end premium vineyards in addition to making these wines under his own label. So he's one of the top guys there, guys or gals. While you're doing that, I'm curious, there's a question from Matt. How many times can you access a cork without the cork starting to become compromised?
So my record is with Charles Curtis, Master of Wine, and Marc Perrin, Beaucastel. We were in Paris. Marc was showing off his new vintage, and he asked us to bring a bottle. We were going to show off Coravin. And so, long story short, brought a Magnum of 06, Beaucastel Chardonnay. And we served it to, I think it was upwards of 30 people. I wrote it on the bottle. So we stuck it 30 times, just demonstrating and pouring. And I actually did it on one of my Coravin Instagram lives. I tasted it for the first time since then. That was 2014. So it struck 30 times, and then I waited 6 years, and the wine was perfect. So
times in one evening, though, right?
That was in one evening. I have there was one. I did a blind tasting with Richard Betts, Maggie Rosen, and Charles Curtis. Richard Betts is a master sommelier. Also makes Grenache in Australia, and tequila, I think. Anyway, we did a blind tasting of a $20 Bordeaux that I had struck 9 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago. It was down to like last glass and a half. And we had a bottle that was out 5 years, and we had a control bottle. We blind tasted through all of them. It was great. But technique is everything. Like, if you're going to access a bottle over and over again, if you don't do this, the quick press of the trigger to push any of that wine out from the last pour, that wine is not going to last. So quick press on the trigger just before you access the bottle is really critical if you're going to do it over and over again. The people that do it the most are the reps, wine sales reps. Those guys access a bottle over and over and over again. And so for them, we teach them technique all the time.
Sure. But so like a bottle is about 26 ounces more or less, I think, right? And a pour from any kind, like at a wine tasting, a pour would be 1 3/4 to 2 ounces more or less. And maybe if you're a rep carrying around a bag on a subway, doing that kind of a job, maybe it's an ounce. So, I mean, you basically would need to be able to access a cork about 25 times without any deterioration at the most. Because
at the most,
a bottle at home, you might access it 5 or 6 times. Is that more or less average?
Yeah, that's it's actually 4 or 5, and then people pull the cork.
Okay.
Like you just did on that Roumier.
I haven't pulled the cork yet, but it's Friday. And it's Saturday and Sunday to come, and I'm telling you, to work as hard as I have right now. So this bottle will be empty very soon. But like visually, like make sure that you're putting in the needle somewhere clean that hasn't been. I mean, do you do that?
You know, I've tried both, and it doesn't seem to matter. We actually designed it so that it was off center, so that it would not strike the same place twice unless you oriented that way. But then restaurants like to show the label when they're pouring. So if
Yeah.
they pour table side, so they always strike it in the same place. And
Okay.
so I tested it both ways, and it didn't seem to make a difference. The
Okay.
biggest open area, if you think about it, in a cork, the biggest open area is not the spot where the Coravin struck. It's the circumference of the outside of the cork, right? That's essentially cork squeezing against something. It's squeezing against glass. It's not squeezing against cork, but that's the largest open area. We're a really small fraction of that open area with every one of our strikes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Here's a really good question from Les, which I haven't thought about so much. If you have a chilled wine, do you have to keep it chilled, or can you put it back in like your cellar or rack?
Oh yeah. Thank you, Les. That's a great question. We call it the rule of cold and old. Cold corks and old corks take longer to reseal. So if you have a really cold wine, I mean, these are like 50 something, so they reseal right away. But if you've got a really chilled wine, like I was just on with Adrian Bridge from Taylor Fladgate, and their recommendation with port is to serve it cold. And if you've got a vintage port, you want to give that cork a minute or two standing upright to reseal before you put it back on its side. And that's true with some people who serve whites really cold. Just make sure you don't strike it and then turn it upside down real quick to show your friends, because cold corks are going to reseal more slowly. And it's also true of old corks. So the oldest bottle I have Coravin is 1892.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, they're epic story. Bottles found under a Czech castle, Castle Betchov.
Is
There's
that
a
like
story about it.
a still wine?
That very good. So they found 144 bottles, I think, buried in a reliquary and around a reliquary under the corner of a church by a Nazi sympathizing Belgian who fled when the Russians were coming. And he buried his wine in this reliquary and just got out of Dodge. And so that was a nationalized property. And in order to renovate the roof, when they found this stuff, they built a museum around the reliquary, which is unbelievable, jewel encrusted, lots of Pope bones. But they found these 144 bottles. They're going to auction them off. And so they flew me in to taste them, to validate that they were real and to see if they were still okay. And I had a master of wine, Andreas Vickhoff, and we tasted through 1892, 1896, and 1899 Chateau Yquem. There was a lot of
Wow.
sweet wine, which is what they drank back then, port,
Yeah.
Madeira. And then the best bottle by far, a Corton Rouge from a producer who does not exist, 1899. And it's one of those wines, when you pour it, we were in a stadium and there were people, not a stadium, but a theater. There were people sitting up, almost like an old anatomy lab where there's sort of steep seating in this, and you could smell it 3 or 4 rows deep as soon as we started to pour it into the glass. Pre-phylloxera, it was it is probably the best glass of wine I've ever had. It was unbelievable to taste that wine. And I remember they gave us 3 bottles of that same wine. I was like, "Are you looking for bottle to bottle variability? I mean, what?" They're like, "Well, no, this producer doesn't exist, so this wine's not important." I was like, "Okay, well then I'll just take these."
I'll do
And
you a favor.
exactly, there's a German sommelier in the back, German Canadian, Justin Leone, Tantris in Munich, which made that restaurant open up again. He goes, "Hey, you guys seem to like that. Can you pour a full glass and pour it around? Because and pass it around." And so we were passing this glass around, and everybody was taking sips and this. And he says at the end, "This winemaker is dead. Their kids are dead. Their grandkids are probably dead. And this vineyard is gone. It's now owned by somebody else. And yet this wine is so alive." And it makes you think about wine and how a winemaker can make a wine that outlasts them, right? When they're thinking about making that wine, Roberto Conterno, he's making a wine that's going to live past him. Federico Ceretto is trying to make a wine that makes past him. All the Burgundians are trying to make wines that outlive them. And we've lost so many great winemakers, and it's amazing to drink their wines and think about those people. Paul Pontellier, Chateau Margaux, to him, what a great guy. Madame Leflèvre, such a dudette.
Yeah, I know, especially, I saw Paul like the summer before he died, and it was just like, we walked through the vineyards of Chateau Margaux, and a few months later he was gone. It's such an incredible visit with him. Everybody, a lot of people met him. He's the most charming, most the nicest person, just a gentle, elegant man.
A scientist and an engineer, by the way. He was an engineer. Yeah.
Man. Oof. Yeah,
that was painful. The last time I saw Madame Leflèvre was at La Paulin in New York, and she had come to we did a blind tasting with the Burgundy producers at Le Cèdre, this beautiful restaurant in Bonn. If you get a chance to go. Got a great cave downstairs. And we would hold these things at 6 months, 1 year, and 2 years. And she had come, and another one of her staff had come, and we'd used her wine on one of the blind tastings. It was at 1 year or 2 years. And they couldn't tell the difference, which was great, because their whites are, if anything's going to go south, they're so precise, they're so beautiful, they're biodynamique, I was in La Paulin, and she sees me, and she comes over, and she like walks up to me and hugs me and goes, "Well done, Monsieur Lambrecht, well done," and just walks away. Oh, that was just before she passed.
Yeah,
that was tough.
All right. Speaking of Chardonnay, I have this question for you from Dave. It says, Greg, a year or so ago, somebody, possibly you from Coravin, popped into a local Mountain View wine shop during a tasting and had a prototype of a future Coravin. It had LED lighting, seemed more automated, different pour sizes. Is that coming out soon, or did I miss its release?
It's already out. Oh, 11. Yeah, model 11. Exactly.
I have one too.
So do you know why it's called Model 11?
Tell us.
Okay, so it's because at Coravin we can't count. Currently, our current products are 3, 6, and 11.
Like Final Tap for us older people.
That's exactly what it is. It's Final Tap. Why is it Model 11? Because it goes to 11.
Is that not it?
That is it. That is the reason. Well done, Antonio. Classic rock musician. So if you don't know those guitars and that guitar and bass behind Antonio, he's a serious rocker. As I've seen him play at a charity event in Canada, with our Canadian importers at one of the best throwdown parties ever. So I'm going to put it on. So it's got a taste mode and a taste mode. That's taste mode. And then it's got a glass mode. It's got 2 modes. And you can set taster glass on your phone if you have a Coravin Moments app. And if you use iPhone, we're going to launch Android soon. And then what you do is you don't have to worry about the trigger anymore. If you set the right volume, and I'm going to use this on a Dana Estates Onda 2013. So if you're looking for a perfectly, precisely made, ginormous California Cabernet that will last indefinitely, this 2013 Dana Estates Onda is that. So there could be no greater contrast with Mathiasen.
Yeah.
Although
basically the second line of Dana Estates, although when you have a producer at that level, it's really hard to call something a second wine. I mean, it's sort of like Port de la Tour for Chateau Latour, or Ponce de la Tour for La Fleur, or any number of other wines with them.
Hershey Vineyards is my favorite of theirs, and unfortunately it's better, and unfortunately it's really, 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 really expensive. So the good news is this pours itself. So
is it
tip and pour?
Special? That's a special extra large.
Yeah, exactly. At 15.5% alcohol, this will be my last glass. So and then you just pull it off. So you can set it. So when it comes to you, it'll pour a 5-ounce pour, and it'll maximize the number of 5-ounce pours you can get. and you can slow it down. There's like a little slider on the phone, which is of course what I'm talking to you in, so I can't show you that. But there's a little slider on the Coravin Moments app, and you can go down to like an ounce and a half or two on a glass, and you can go up to a half bottle. Because we had some restaurants doing a half bottle program, where they would pour everything. They would pour a half bottle using Coravin. So their whole list was full bottle and half bottle. And they'd pour the first half using a Coravin if somebody ordered a half bottle, and then they would pull the cork and sell the other half bottle. So they used less gas, and it was very simple to keep inventory. Anyway, that's why we did that. And the taste will go from like a half an ounce all the way up to a full glass.
Wow. So on that subject, there's a question about from Jay about Coravin in restaurants. Obviously, it's a great way to taste rare wines by the pour, but for people watching who are maybe more in the trade of wine, when restaurants start opening, the question is, when restaurants start opening again, how can they best use Coravin to kickstart their wine programs?
So I was on with on our Instagram live with George Miliotis from Wine Bar George down in Florida. Go and look at his wine bar menu or his wine menu. That is how you do it. He has one Coravin per sommelier. They each carry 2 capsules with them just in case. And we're going to be launching a bunch of new stuff for restaurants when they open up, because we love restaurants. And George does verticals. He has like a 9-year vertical where he pours you like, I think it's like 2 ounces of 9 different vintages of one very epic Italian producer and charcuterie. That's it. It's $250. And you know what? He's like, I go through so many of those bottles. I never sold them by the bottle, and now I'm like ripping through all these bottles. It's doing something creative like that, giving somebody an experience that they will never forget, that they would not do at home because they don't have the 9-year vintage vertical. I did the same thing. It was a dessert, Felidia Bastianich in New York. 3 decades of Chateau Yquem and cheese. So it was an 80, 85, 95, 05, or it was maybe shifted 86, 96, 06. And cheese, $100. And it was like a third of like an ounce, maybe, or an ounce and a half of each of the different vintages. Where are you going to get to try 30 years of wine? No, or 20 years of wine. It was, those are the things you never forget. So creating unforgettable experiences, offering bottles that you don't think people, there's a bunch of simple ways that restaurants use it. 5 whites, 5 reds, 2 dessert wines. That's the most common Coravin menu. And they'll say sommelier select or Coravin selection. 5 whites, 5 reds, 2 dessert. And with their normal wine list goes up to like 20 something, and then the Coravin list goes from there and above. That's the basic one if you want to start. Some of the cool ones that I've seen, people have a 50 or 60 glass wine by the glass list, and they'll just put the Coravin logo by the glasses that are poured by Coravin. That's another way I've seen it. The other one that I love, that half bottle program, is awesome. It keeps everything simple. You only pour once by Coravin, then you pull the cork and pour again. So your inventory is really easy. And it's incredible to see a list where everything's half bottle or full. In some places like New York, I've seen people, and Boston, you can do this, where they'll sell you the bottle, they'll Coravin you a couple of glasses, and you take the rest home.
That's really cool.
Yeah, because it's not
illegal,
really
cool.
It's not necessarily illegal. They consider it an open bottle. It's a very, very small opening. So, Massachusetts, they didn't want you to drive home drunk, so you could put it in a bag. I don't consider it to be illegal. It's on the edge of where the law is really going to come down after all this.
Novel. I mean, obviously, Coravin has really changed the pattern of consumption of wine, and I mean at home, obviously, but in restaurants. I mean, I think even just the half bottle idea is brilliant because you 2 people go out to dinner, you want to have a white and a red, you don't want to drink 2 bottles of wine, and now you can have a glass of half a bottle of Sancerre or Chablis or white Burgundy or California Chardonnay, and have a half a bottle of red, and everybody's happy, and you haven't overdone it either.
That's it.
Or in terms of your drinking. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was brilliant. It took off. It started in California with a guy named Jim Kennedy, who's moved on from the restaurant. But I mentioned it in Australia when I was touring Australia, and it just took off in Australia. The half bottle program.
So
what do you got?
And I'm having Chardonnay at the end, Burgundy style. But this is also a Santa Barbara wine from the Hilt. So this is obviously also Santa Barbara, obviously. This is the winery that owns Screaming Eagle and Honata, and this is their Chardonnay. And they make a couple of different Chardonnays, but the Old Guard is the bottling that they sort of designed to be a little bit more, because of the name, a little bit more focused, a little bit more taut, and a little more energetic. And it's just a beautiful wine, 17. So this is the first time I've accessed it. So we'll see how it goes. But I did pretty good job the first time.
Yeah, I trust you.
We only have a few minutes left, so I'm curious because I see these pictures of you like on social media. Like it must be like your home like lab with your like all of your tools, like dreaming up like some next concoction. So what can you tell us about what's next for Coravin? What are you working on?
So when I founded the company, I said faster, easier, more fun than opening a bottle, independent of closure, still or sparkling. That was like, I wanted to make t-shirts. This is what we're doing. And so Model 11, faster, easier, more fun than opening a bottle. Model 6, faster, easier, more fun than opening a bottle, I think. Independent of closure, Coravin screw cap. So now going out to a year, blind taste, feel free. So you just crack the bottle, put our screw cap on top. Same silicone supplier as my implant underneath the skin. Actually, we use the same needle from the same guy who made the needle that I use. It's amazing how kismet comes around. So still or sparkling. There are going to be two huge things that we do this year. One is going to be a new product for the trade. My goal was pour a glass in 3 seconds, wine lasts for 3 months. 3 seconds, 3 months. And that's going to be coming out later this year, I think. And then the other one is sparkling. So I've spent the last 8 years, and my wonderful Coravin team, who are like transcendent engineers and marketing people, we believe we have solved sparkling. And so imagine being able to come home every day and say, I'm going to do a vertical of Krug. I just feel like a vertical of Krug. Why not?
I'd love to. I'd love to. Give any tips? I'd love to.
And then go, you know what? I like Krug Salon Salos. I really wondered. Exactly. Let's just do a horizontal. We'll do an O2 horizontal.
Okay, I'm in.
Just right. You are welcome to the throwdown. And there are so many great producers, like so many great producers. It's my argument on the tagline is celebrate every day. I don't even want to call it Coravin or sparkling or whatever. I just want to call it celebrate every day. And because we're gonna get away from numbering from here on out, unless something like Model 11 comes up again. But I am so excited by what's coming. 3 seconds, 3 months, and sparkling, if we can do that. And then we call this Model 11. It was the first of a digital series. It's amazing when you have electrons what you can do. And we're working with you guys, so we've got Delectable on our side. So there's bottle recognition, there's pouring with bottle recognition. So we have these. What I would like people to be able to do is seamlessly keep track of all the wines that they poured and what's left in the bottle and how much is out. And so I would. There's still a lot to do, right? I mean, this is a great package. Please don't change it. We'll be using this package going forward at Coravin. We anticipate this package. And sparkling, I just have to shout out to Gosset, because you guys make the weirdest damn bottle on the planet from a sparkling wine. And anything that we have done with Coravin Sparkling is because of you. They're good people, and the wine's not bad either. So, if somebody had to force you to change your design, it's a good group.
Of course, right? Well, I think that's a great place to end, Greg. Thanks so much for your time. I always love talking to you because you've got this contagious enthusiasm, and it's inspiring, and it's just fun to work with you and all of the great people you have at your company. So thanks for sharing. I think we'll have lots more to tell people about things that we're working on in the coming months, and on all your success. It's fantastic.
I'm lucky to have gotten to know you, Antonio.
I have the Santa Barbara. Cheers.
Cheers, man.
Talk to you soon. Everyone. See ya.